Hello. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how the Pattern Scripts plugin might be used to switch cars at an industry. And the industry I chose is the American Steel and Wire Company, their Pittsburgh plant. It's shown here as part of a train player layout that I made by compositing up a bunch of Sanborn fire insurance maps from 1915. The American Steel and Wire Company was famous for basically their wire products. They made barbed wire, they made cable for suspension bridges, and apparently they also made horseshoes. It's part of the Carnegie Empire, and even though I don't know much about how steel factories work, I didn't let that stop me from going ahead and trying to implement this as best I could. So in this case there's some charge tracks, there's a slag pile, there's some mill tracks, there's some spur tracks that load various products. It has a yard, and the whole mill, or the whole mill is served by this one track right here. It's a transfer track, and that connects to the Penzies Allegheny Valley Railroad or the B&O's Pittsburgh Junction Railroad. Here's a picture of it in all its glory in 1906. So apparently that was a time when there was good money to be made in making smokestacks. So let's see how we would use this plugin. The way I have it set up is that I have these 6 trains that serve the mill, and they're divided into 2 groups of 3. The first group of 3 delivers the minerals or bulk products, however you want to say it, and the other group of 3 works the manifest. And for each one of those, the first train is an industry switch. It pulls the cars and respots as necessary. I have local moves turned on, and then it sets the cars that it pulls out at the transfer track. The second train is a turn. It picks up cars from staging, delivers them to the transfer track, picks up the transfer track, and then returns to staging. And then the third train is also an industry switch. It picks up the transfer track, sets the cars out into the mill, and does any additional respots as necessary. Let's start with something simple. The slag cars are captive to the mill. All they do is go back and forth between the furnace tracks and the slag pile. So let's take a look at that. I'll select the Bessemer track, the open hearth track, and the slag pile track and do a pattern. There's 1 car in Bessemer, 1 in open hearth, and there's 3 on the slag pile. So let's move those cars off the pile and put them over onto one of the furnace tracks. Doesn't really matter which ones. We'll take a look, select slag pile and hit set cars. Now if your track is a spur and the spur has a schedule, the schedule will display for that spur, and it opens up the familiar edit window. So in this case we received mill slag cars, and it's a receives molten slag and ships empty, and then in the other case it receives empty gondolas and ships slag. So what we'll do is we'll take these cars and let's put them in Bessemer, for lack of a better place. We'll do that, and as usual, we can print up a switch list, hand them to, there we go, print up a switch list, hand it to your switch crew, and they'll move those cars from Bessemer, or from the slag pile over to Bessemer. Then when they're done, we'll hit set. We'll take another look at Bessemer, open hearth, and slag pile, take a pattern, and there we go. You can see that there's no more cars as slag pile, and all those cars are moved over to Bessemer. Okay, now let's look at how the Pattern Script plugin might work with JMRI trains. To do that, let's build this train here. It's the manifest pulls. What it does is it pulls cars from the spurs, sets them into the transfer track, and also respots any cars from the yard to the spurs as necessary, because I have local moves turned on. So I built the train, I'll preview it, and yep, these cars right here are being respotted from the yard to the spurs, and these cars right here are being pulled from the spurs, set into the transfer track. The only problem is that there's 15 cars being set into a track that can hold between 19 and 20, so the train is under tonnage. Before we make any more changes, I'm going to show you this feature right here. We'll take a look at the yard. I'm going to go ahead and press set cars, And you can see that some of these cars here are highlighted. And what this plugin does is if the car you're thinking about moving is already part of a train, scheduled to a train, or is on a train, then it will highlight that car. So it's your yard. You can do what you want. You can move the car if you want to, but be advised the switch crew may not find it because it's already been built into a train. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this train, and now we'll take another look at the set cars window, and you can see, yep, there's no highlighted, so all these cars are good to move. And I notice there's some cars here we can put in the slag pile, and some cars here we can put in Pittsburgh iron and steel. So I'm going to close that, press Pittsburgh iron and steel, and pop them back open again. So I'm going to press Pittsburgh iron and steel. I'm going to set those cars there, and there's two cars going to the slag pile, so let's go ahead and put them to the slag pile. Now we can go ahead and print this up and hand it to your switch crew, and you can see that these cars here are going to the slag pile. They're empty, and these cars here are going to Pittsburgh iron and steel. They're also empty. So hand it to your switch crew, they do the work, they report it done, you set the cars. And over here, I also, by the way, I have ignore track link turned on. That's why it allowed me to do that. And we have these cars right here that are loaded with steel products already at Pittsburgh iron and steel. So we're going to go ahead and set those into the yard and print up the switch list, hand it to your crew, and when they report the work done, we go ahead and set those cars. Now we can look at the cars again, and those cars are now up here. The steel cars, the three steel product cars, are up here, and the cars that we set into had their schedule set into Pittsburgh iron and steel, had their schedule applied, and now they're loaded with steel products and ready for the next train. So at this point we can build our train again, take a look and see what we have. We'll preview it, and now we can see that it is picking up 19 cars from spurs and setting them into the transfer track. And it's still doing a whole bunch of respotting. So this is good, we can do that. So we print this up, hand it to your switch crew, they go ahead and do the work, and then when they report the work done, you go ahead and terminate the train. And now we can run the turn. So we'll build the turn, pick one of the departure tracks, say OK, it's building. It's built. We'll preview it, and you can see it picks up these cars from the staging track, delivers them to the transfer track, picks up these cars from the transfer track, and delivers them to staging. So that looks okay. So we'll go ahead and run the train, and when it's done, we'll terminate it. And now we can move on to the last train in the group, the manifest spots. So let's build the train, preview it, and we see that there's a lot of cars loaded with scrap, a few empties, and a merchandise car. So the train is going to the transfer track, picking up the cars and setting them out, spotting some at industry and some into the yard. And they're spotting these into the yard because I'm using alternate tracks. So this looks okay. We'll go ahead and print that switch list up for the crew. They get authority out onto the way line, head over to the transfer track, pull the cars, and clear up back in the plant. So that one looks good. We like it, so we'll terminate it. Now we can go back to the Pattern Scripts plugin. But before we do, let's take a look at this manifest pulls train. We'll build it real quick. It shows 25 cars assigned to it, and we can see that it's only setting out 13 cars to the transfer track. So there isn't really enough traffic to set cars into the transfer track. So we'll reset that and return to the Pattern Scripts plugin. Now I'll show you something we can do. We're going to look at the scrap pile, the slag pile, and the yard. So we'll select those three, hit set cars. So the scrap pile can hold 3 cars. So we're going to select scrap, if I can find it, and set these 3 cars to the scrap pile. Again, print it up, hand it to your switch crew. They go out, do the work. When it's done, it's set. Now the slag pile receives empties and ships loads slag. So those are loaded with slag. So we're going to go ahead and set those into the yard. So we're clearing off the slag pile and setting those into the yard. You know, print it up, do the work, set the cars. And now here's the scrap pile. So the scrap pile receives scrap at the open hearth mill and returns empties. So those empties can now go to the slag pile. And you can set this up as trains in JMRI, but this is a nice shortcut and it allows you to do things however you want to. So we'll set those in the slag pile, set them, and there we go. So it's a way of just moving one to another to another to another without building a train, because you know the work that needs to get done because you're the plant manager. Also, for the purposes of this video, I glossed over these three trains right here, the mineral trains. They're basically the same thing, only instead of manifest, it's minerals. And we can look at the yard and see that there's some cars scheduled here to the charge track. So again, as the plant manager, you would probably dovetail those operations and wouldn't do just manifest or just minerals. You would combine them together and keep your switch crew really, really busy. So thank you for watching.